Cool. This will be good to look back over exercise later. Exercise 4, part 1. And the lecture or whatever. So yeah, we're going to be covering this follow-up lecture. I'm going to try to get through that fairly quickly. That's going to be a little bit of a recap from the first couple of chapters of reading. So kind of like as a refresher. And then getting us situated for what I'd like to reference as like the 3 main components of coding that I want you all to be learning this semester. And then after we cover those like 3 main components, you get a general sense of like what those are. 4, we're going to put them in motion. And also like get a preview of how we can utilize audio, like how easy it is to upload audio and have audio be played. So we get a little bit of interaction today. Not really actually much. Is there any interaction? I mean, unless you guys want to use mouse X, mouse Y stuff. The lecture or the exercise itself is kind of just automated. So can I pin myself here? Let's do that. Pin. Okie doke. Let me open this keynote, and now that I think about it, let me get my other computer right next to this one. Oh, keynote went offline. Oh, classic. I gotta sign in again. Apple, what's the point of having a toggle for keep me signed in if it's not going to keep me signed in? I'm going to go ahead and blame that on my old computer though. My Chrome is like definitely out of date. I even get this notice every time I come in here. To get future Google Chrome updates, you'll need to update this computer. It's kind of telling me like, you have X many days to live. Just trying to get my notes back open. Do I even need my notes? I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna do this. I had them ready, but I forget my computer dies. P5 JS. Continue. Click. So the reading should have gone through a pretty nice overview of like what the need of having like processing in this now P5, what the need is for, and you know, giving the fundamentals within this way, this visual way. So it's got a pretty nice overview. And again, just situating us, you know, as potentially first-time programmers, thinking more in terms of like artistic expression and, you know, coding for the arts, more so, right? If we wanted to be like hardcore programmers, you'd be in computer science. So we've already played around a little bit with vectors. We will get into using images next class, right? Raster stuff. But we're sticking with the vector stuff for today, because it's really nice, has really nice cause and effect. Just a single color. There's not a lot of distractions to keep you from comprehending like what's really going on. There are different color modes. We're just sticking with RGB, and obviously interactions, right? We have the ability to do some stuff. Today, we're not even doing interacting. We're just doing manipulation. We'll talk more in a bit. But the other different uses for P5, like if you're going to take DMS110, or if you already have, you'll go more in depth into object orientation, which is kind of like pre-planning for variation, I guess. It almost takes more time and effort and energy to build up things initially, but then once things are established, they're a lot easier to update and reference back to. So like a good way of thinking about object orientation is like Pong, the game Pong, right? Where you have like a paddle on the side of on each side of the screen, and then you have your ball, right? So you could have an object class set up for the ball and a class set up for the paddle. And so instead of doing all this math of checking to see, is your paddle up here or is your ball anywhere up here, right? Instead of like these seemingly endless lines of code for all of these micro incremental checks of where something might be, you just define the class of this object. So the object itself is defined in relation to the canvas. Same thing with the ball. So like they kind of communicate with one another. Once like they overlap, they could be overlapping anywhere. And if they know they're overlapping, you could have a trigger happen. So there's this clear sense of having them be a little bit more like cognizantly compiled, objects. But the other big one too, which I never got into when I was teaching 110, is network communication. This could be something as simple as like using weather data, like what the temperature is right now, the wind speed, like basic stuff like that. From like any city, right? Like you're just pulling specific data from some specific place. And there's really, like you could follow a demo. Like if you've already taken 110, network communication would be really easy to do. I haven't done it. But essentially, if we're able to like move a mouse around and get that data, like that input data, right? We're using that data as an input into this P5 environment. You could do the same thing with weather data. You're importing the data. It's just the way in which you import it is different. But it'd be really sweet to be able to utilize. So if you're already gone through and done like object orientation, network communication is like, simpler. It's just like another outlet. So it could be interesting to think about that of incorporating in some way, like a world clock, different things. We've already talked about the coordinate system, right? X, Y, moving things around. This is a preview of processing window. So we are now in P5. So it'll look different. I should have swapped this out, I know. And it actually doesn't say void anymore. It's called function. So function setup, function draw. Aside from that, everything's pretty much the same. So just got to ignore that, I guess, for now. So I'm just going to be covering these basic components here. So like I said, now that these are function setup, function draw, like if I go to P5 and I go to the editor, you'll see that it really is function setup, function draw, right? So these the setup and draw, they're like declared, they're already known functions. Like P5 already knows what they are and how to use them. And we already have discussed how setup is run once and draw is on a continuous loop. right? And then we have these function calls, which are, calls to said function, like a draw call of stroke. Any of these calls, they'll be highlighted in like a blue color. Same thing here. It's blue, right? Is that they're always going to start with the name, right? And then have parentheses and then end with a semicolon every single time. That's just what a function call will look like. Now, what's all inside the parentheses will change dependent on what the call is, right? And we've known this in terms of if we're calling a square versus a triangle versus a line, calling something with a background of RGB, right? We know that there's 3 values. Well, sometimes it could just be grayscale with 1 value, right? Those are inherently known properties of each function call. So it's not that you have to memorize what needs to go in there. We have that for reference. We always have the reference online to go look at. So the important thing here is grasping that we understand how the structure is working. We have these blocks of code, function setup, function draw, and they're going to include different parameters, these different kinds of like arguments that are helping us form what it is we're doing with our code. Okay. This is what I refer to as the first thing you guys should know about coding. We got 2 more coming up. So again, this is just showing you different parameters per thing, different drawing attributes. It's all stuff we already kind of talked about on the first day. This isn't, I got to update this lecture though. So this is getting into the second one. Variables. Variables are what will offer variation in our coding. Who would have thunk? Yeah. There are different types of variables. We could be dealing with decimal numbers, which are floating. Some people like to use Booleans, which is like saying something's on or off, right? Yes or no. Like it's like a button's off, and then you click it, and then you can say, true. Button equals true. I personally don't even use Booleans. I pretty much just always use integers unless for some reason it requires a floating number. Some things do require a float. And then when you get into using anything analog, like anything that you're plugging in for like raw data to be streaming into the computer, most often it's usually always a floating number, kind of like how do you measure 1 cup of water, right? We can get pretty close, but there's always going to be a decimal, right? Always, really. So you'll see a lot of like real world type of stuff as decimals, floating numbers. But for us, if we're staying pretty much self-contained, we can just use integers. So maybe there's a button, the button equals 0. If you click the button, it'll be 1, right? And then we know that button has been clicked because it's equal to 1 or whatever. So just these whole numbers is really all we need to focus on in terms of like what is a variable. It's a container. That's what I keep trying to have you guys think about. Like how much liquid is in this container? Looks like 40 out of 100 40%. So maybe, you know, this could be called a variable. The variable could be called water bottle, and it could be equal to 40, right? That's like assigning a numerical value to a word or a phrase. So that's really what variables are. Can I not continue in non-full screen? So I got this pretty crude example here down below. This isn't playing out because I'm not doing full screen. So like, what's a perfect score, right? 100, okay? So we're assigning we already know that like 100 is relating to this word called perfect, or perfect score, I guess I should quote, right? So we could have a variable name called perfect score, and assign it a value of 100. And then we could really use that variable called perfect score anywhere that we could put a number, and we have that ability to change it if we need to, right? So here's the examples. Like, you'll see a lot of examples online as well of using just X. We're going to use that today as well, just to kind of get your feet wet. It's nothing special. It's literally a name. We're defining a name with one character. It's just a character. It's a name, right? So normally you want to do this. You want to create names that are a little bit more meaningful to like what it is you're doing. Not always. Some things just need to like spit out a value, and you could use that for something that's meaningful. But for the most part, you know. So here we can see that we have like you know, integer or variable called p, right? And we're assigning a value of 1 to it, and then poop 2. So we have this thing called emergency, and we're assigning a value to it of p plus poop. Pretty tough stuff, right? That would be 3. Emergency is now equal to 3. Do we see how like we're containing values within names? So that's just kind of defining though, right? We're setting something up. We're not changing anything here. We're just establishing values. So this is a quick note about naming things. They can only contain letters and numbers or underscores. So most generally, you want to do something that's like, you know, relating to whatever it is you're assigning the name for. And if it has multiple words, which oftentimes it will, you'll want to follow this principle of naming, the structure of naming. One of my computer science kids last class told me it's called camel case. I haven't even looked it up yet. Where every letter except the first word starts off with a capital letter. And because case is sensitive, you need to follow the same structure all the time. Otherwise, your code's going to have an error if it doesn't have, you know, if the letter's wrong or something. So if you're always following the same principle, right, this like camel case, I guess, the logic is like later on when you're going to put something in, you won't have to guess what it was, like how you named it, right? You'll be able to type it more clearly, a little easier if other people are helping you or looking at your code. It's just kind of like a system that's often used. So it's a good thing to get in the habit of doing. Okay, so that was part 2 of coding in a nutshell. We're on to part 3, conditionals. So this is the last bit of coding you need to know. Does anybody have questions, by the way? Got my chat. Here's my chat open again. I could take private questions as well. If you guys are confused about something, you know. So conditionals, they're fundamental building blocks. What does that mean? It means a code really can't move forward without a condition. I mean, it can. It could just kind of continually do the same thing over and over. It's really like these moments of action, I guess is a good way to describe it as well. You want something to happen. Execute something. Like a different path. There's these three different types of conditional statements. We really only need to use one for the whole class. Maybe a couple of you might use else, but I've personally never even used then. I don't think I have. So what's happening here is you can see that we're putting this inside of the draw loop, right? But then it doesn't end with a semicolon. It ends here with like another bracket, or like it starts like a second curly bracket, and then another line of code, and then it ends a curly bracket. So what's going on here is that a conditional, it's going to check something against something else. And you see there's two equal signs here. These are all expressions. There's a bunch of different types, right? We have referenced all these online. Two equal signs is equivalent to. So if we go back, if emergency is equivalent to 3, if that is true, if statements are questioning if something is true or if something is false. So if emergency is equal to the value of 3, which, as before we figured out, as it is right here, this is 3, yes. So this is true. If that's true, then you execute whatever's inside of the curly brackets following it. Okay. And we'll talk more about like what this is once we get our example open. But we can see here that line 14, that we're kind of back to that default way of, putting in a semicolon at the end. Else, just for the sake of knowledge, your own knowledge, if emergency is false, or if emergency is not equal to 3, I should say, we would not execute line 14 at all. We would skip right over it. And then nothing else happens. Or if we want something to happen when emergency does not equal 3, we would use the else. Else follows directly after an if. So we can utilize both ways, like if it is 3 or if it is not 3, we can kind of say something, make something happen or not happen. Okay, so we get a bunch of these, and we could have said like, if emergency is greater than 3 or if emergency is less than 3, we could put any of these operators in there that we want. If it does not equal the value of, there's a lot of different things. And then we will also, next class on Wednesday, we're going to be getting into nesting conditional statements, like putting a conditional inside of a conditional. Like, why would you do that? Kind of helps. we'll kind of talk about why and see it in action. But the logic is that you could just write it all in one line instead of two conditionals, like nested in top of one another, inside of one another. So we could say like if, and then parentheses, X is less than 20, or two vertical pipes, X is greater than 80, and then put a curly bracket. So we're kind of asking two questions at the same time to evaluate if the statement is true, right? We can set multiple conditions. Just other 2D transformations. If anybody ends up using rotate, you'll want to reference push pop. You'll probably want to talk to me as well, but push pop. We've already talked about color. So interactivity, we're not going to get into this class yet. It's kind of like stepping our way to it. But yeah, obviously, as I've said several times, dealing with mouse stuff and keyboard stuff. Interesting thing to think about though is like a keyboard doesn't have to be like a full click, like you press down, you let go. It could be like if your mouse is, if it's being pressed, if it's being released, if it's being moved. There are a lot of different kind of uses that you could access for specifics or multiple of them. Oh, and then just like a last little thing. This just needs redesigned, this lecture. Cursors, instead of this like default pointer cursor, you can change it to a few other defined ones, or you could use images. Images are a little bit limited, I think. I don't remember. Yeah. That's it. That's it. Questions? We're going to be opening up exercise 4. Everybody should open this page. Man, it is warm in here. I wonder if I could turn some computers off. All right. So before we get going with this, realistically, you all should have read the intro to that book and the first couple chapters. And you've done the 1 hour of code, you've gotten through that. You understand the basic logic of setup and draw, and you're able to draw some shapes, change some colors around, right? Getting a sense of like how the code is reading top to bottom, how you're like able to layer stuff, right? That's the expectation for today, that you've done that. So if you haven't done all of those and you end up feeling a little lost today, it's a good reason why, right? You're kind of slacking. So again, I know that a lot of people haven't been asking a lot of questions this semester because people don't want to like admit they have questions or something. But still offering up, like I have this private chat thing, you guys can message me if you're confused about something. I don't expect everybody to grasp everything that I say like right off the bat. So please, I would actually expect everybody does not grasp what I say right off the bat. So not having questions makes me worried. Let's just say that. This is in two parts, this exercise. We're going to do the other one on Wednesday. We will need to download right here, exercise 4.1 audio files. I already have them. I already downloaded them. You want to get that. Removed. Oh yeah, I already deleted it. So once you've downloaded that, it'll come as a zip. You double click the zip, it'll open a folder. Right? And once you've unzipped it, you could delete the zip. The zip is, at that point, would just be taking up space, right? You're kind of extracting whatever is in there, but the stuff that was in there still in there. You're kind of like duplicating and opening. So for sake of storage space, right? Kind of get rid of those when you're done. So inside here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different audio tracks, and each of them has a variation of format, right? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why. So heading back. And do I have the other one down minimized? Yeah, perfect. All right, so we're gonna name this, right? And I need to do a new one. So we have blank canvas here. Once you, hopefully you're already signed in. Make sure you're signed in. Otherwise, you're not gonna be able to save this. And we want to click right here, right? And we want to change the name. So I'm calling this exercise 4, part 1. And the spring semester. Now, the follow-up to this is that now that we have this here, right, and it's saved, you can do a save. And if you don't do a save right off the bat, it won't do an auto save. So like, if you don't save right now, later you close your window, you leave your computer, whatever, it's not going to save this, or it shouldn't by default. So I would do a first save, and then I want you guys to, we haven't talked about this. There's a little arrow here, drop arrow under play. If we click that, this is going to open up and show us our sketch files that are inside this current sketch that we're working on. These are everything that it takes to have this run inside this p5js.org site. It just compresses everything. we are only working on the sketch file, but there's also an HTML file and a style sheet. But we never need to access those. So I'm bringing our attention to this because the first thing we're going to be doing is bringing our audio files in here as well. So this will be a similar process for bringing in our image files that we want to use. This is how we would get the content in. So once you have this dropped over, right, we want to make a folder for all of our assets, everything that we're going to be putting into our project. And so we could either go to Sketch and add folder, or there's a little drop down here and we can create folder. Either way, we just want to make a folder called assets, lowercase. Right, the case will be sensitive, so just no spaces. Add folder. And we should see over here that we have now an assets folder. Doesn't show anything under it because we haven't added anything. And if we click the little drop down on the right of that folder, we can upload files. So this is just a drag and drop box. I will note to you that if you're trying to drag and drop a lot of things in here, there's a possibility of things to go wrong. And I want you to just like kind of like look at my screen first and watch how it happens. So if I were to grab all of these and bring them in at the same time, right, it's going to show individual files loading here. But what I want you guys to like watch is over here where assets is. Okay, so you see like things loaded and then paused and then load some more. But this doesn't even show that it's done. Just, it's still saying like it's loading, right? It's just a glitchy, weird thing that happens every single time you add multiple assets. So you could go and just do one at a time if you want to really make sure things are going smoothly. I've had things in the past where I thought everything was uploaded and then I closed this window prematurely. And sometimes I've had the audio file show up over here and sometimes not, like it didn't load at all. But then if it doesn't show up correctly, you know, it'll have an error and you have to like re-upload it. So there are some little bugginess things about it. So I want to make sure I'm making note of that for you all. But now we should just be able to close that. And see how we see these dots? We don't see the full name. So we could drag this over and we could get the full name in case we need it for something. We're gonna see why in a second. Okay. So we got those in. First thing I want us to do is, so with these exercises, this one and the one on Wednesday, I just have you guys go and grab chunks of this orange type and we're gonna be pasting it in together. But the purpose isn't just to like not, you know, grasp what's going on and just do this blindly. We're gonna be stopping at each point and talking about it. And this is where you should be asking any sorts of questions. You know, if you're not getting why we're doing something, not just like, oh, it's working, so I must know what I'm doing. You're copying and pasting code, right? You gotta ask questions if you don't grasp it. So we're gonna paste this above setup. So I'm gonna go up here, return this down, and paste. All right. And so what I like to do at this point is notate how we have these global variables at the top, right? And did somebody just join or? or this code is on exercise 4. So like you can go either the schedule or the main page and there's exercise 4. And then we're on step 5. Okay. So looking at this, what I normally like to do, and you guys should really follow the same principle so that all of our code looks very, very similar. And when we're looking at each other's stuff, we don't have to think about it. We just can kind of grasp it because how things are organized. So first thing I would do is, you know, kind of like how variables is at the top, these global variables. Talk about that in a second. What I would do is have some space between them and the next block of code. Same thing with here. Same thing with here, right? We have this very now like literally like separating these blocks. So they're more easily distinguishable as separate entities, right? So global variables, like, okay, yeah, they're variables, VAR variable. We're naming a variable here. Okay, great. Why is it a global variable? Well, we could actually define a variable like inside of draw if we wanted to. That wouldn't be a global variable. It would be a local variable because it's only now going to be accessible inside of draw. Like if I were to go up here and say, you know, player 1 equals 1, you know, pretend like I don't have this here. If I were to go play that, that's not going to do anything. Or shouldn't do anything. Let's try it out. Print player 1. Undefined. So because we defined variable 1 inside of draw, we can note here that player 1 is not blue, right? However, if we cut this out and paste that in down here, well, I guess it's still not blue. And we run that, we see that it is now player 1, or it is 1. So what's happening is this variable is only accessible locally if you define it locally, but if you define it outside of other functions, that variable then can be accessible to any blocks of code that you want it to be accessed in. Hopefully, hoping that little example makes that a little clearer. So if we just get in the habit of defining all the variables at the very top, number 1, they're all organized and, you know, we can find them quick. And then number 2, it kind of makes more sense, right? If we're reading top down, the code's reading top down, it understands what something is, or it slaps that into the system, and then we utilize them afterwards, right? So we're declaring something called player 1. That is now a variable. We made that up, right? We could do this with anything. Literally. Looks like not semicolons. But literally anything, right? So Once we have that declared, now we can use, you know, player 1 for something or player 2 for something. We can put something inside of that container. So here we have this thing called preload, which is a new function. It's also a function that P5 understands, right? And it's used in this web presence where things have to load into a web page, right? If a user is going to play your file and you have an image in there, it has to be loaded before they can play it, right? So what this does is it forces the program to load the different assets before anything happens. So it kind of like primes you, right? So we put these different loading things in for right here. We would put images, we would load images here. Any files potentially, if you were to load a file. So not only do you have to put them in the assets folder, but now we have to call on them. The folder is just containing it. Just like if you're going to make a Photoshop project, right? You have images in a folder, but then you still have to import them into Photoshop. Same premise here. So we have player 1, 2, and 3. It's set to the value of, right? We're assigning something to that. And it's going to be the value of load sound. What's load sound? It's just telling it it's a sound file. You don't have to memorize this because you're going to save it and you have access to copying and pasting, you know, potentially this whole preload thing in your project. The logic here is that you're understanding what load sound is doing. Right? And then within parentheses, we have to put either in asterisks, parentheses, not parentheses, quotes, or asterisks. Isn't it asterisk? Why am I blanking? It's not an asterisk. What are these? Am I talking to a wall?
Quotes.
Apostrophe. Jesus Christ, my mind is mush. So we have these apostrophes or quotes. Either one's fine, right? And that's all we're doing. We're just preloading it. We're not playing it anywhere. You know, we're just drawing a canvas and a background. So if we hit play, you should get this to pop up. Does anybody get loading just continuously?
So it actually just deleted all my sounds and won't let me re-drop them.
Just refresh page.
Refresh. Okay.
Does everybody get this to come up? The white box here, the gray box? I'll assume everybody has that. Okay. Cool. And then we want to put this next bit, still part of step 7 looks like, inside of setup. So I'm going to copy that. And here's setup. Got to put it inside of the brackets. Boom. Oh, and so the one thing I forgot to mention is when we pasted this function preload, we'll note that I already had comments there, right? It says ends preload. What do you guys think that means? Or like, why did I put that there? It's not a trick question or anything.
To indicate to us that the preload is done after these things go on, like after those go.
Yeah, but how do we know that's where preend is done at?
Because that's where the squiggly bracket is.
Totally. That's all. Yeah, that's all I'm looking for, right? That's the final bracket. And if you click there, right, it shows you where the beginning bracket is. Or if you click next to the beginning bracket, it shows you the end bracket. Not only that, but if you have all your code tidied up, like literally there's a thing for tidy code. By default, most of the time it is. But you'll see that this line with the starting bracket and this line with the ending bracket, they're aligned left, whereas everything inside of them is tabbed over, right? So that's another visual indicator that things are inside of other things. But as we continue on with this exercise today, we're going to be getting into putting conditionals in, which have additional brackets. So what ends up happening is you could end up getting a little bit confused in terms of like which bracket is doing which, especially like getting, you know, used to like what the hell are brackets even for. So what I might recommend is just going down through here and putting in some comments for the other two. Simple as that. So we did put this player 3 loop in setup, and that is literally referencing player 3, meaning that sound file. And dot loop is literally telling it to loop the file. Like when it's done, start over at the beginning again. There's other calls called like play, you know, stop. There's one that's rewind. So we're going to be covering all of those. But if we play this, we should get that sound of this like knocking. Okay. The one thing I did not mention as well is the first time I ran this today, I got an error. So we went down the ship. We sailed the ship in terms of how to troubleshoot. So we haven't gotten to troubleshooting yet, but we'll get there probably. Something will come up. So the thing that I glossed over here is this sound formats. So you'll notice that it's kind of listing what you would think it is listing. M4A, because we have M4A files, so we might as well, right? We should have that listed. .wave, right? Have that listed. We're not even putting the dot there though. We're just putting the extension. And you'll also notice that these don't have the extension written there. They only have assets with a slash, meaning that it's like in an assets folder, right? Kind of like directory lingo. But yeah, what this does is this is telling the browser, hey, load this file name, but you can use either M4A or Wave. And because we've uploaded both options, the browser is going to choose whichever one it can use. Some browsers can't support certain file extensions. So if you go to send this link to somebody and they want to check out your project and they click on it, if they have, you know, like, I don't know, Safari, maybe Safari can't open a Wave file, for instance, I don't know. And all you had was Wave, then they wouldn't even be able to see your project. let alone hear your project. It just won't load at all because it can't execute something, so it's just going to break. This allows for that that chance and making sure that it's accommodating for the platforms, right? Everybody's running different setups. And this little tiny tweak, right? This one little extra thing is like such a nice trade-off in comparison to not having your stuff on the web at all, right? Just using processing, and you can never share it with anybody. You can never really use it on a portfolio. So it's just another thing to kind of remember to put in there, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So, all right, so now we have some audio playing. Reminder, always get questions, throw them out. We're gonna copy line 7, and we're gonna put this in with our other global declarations at the top. Okay. Right. And so here we're declaring a new variable called X. That is the name. X is the name. 0 is its game. It is equal to 0. We technically don't even need equals 0, and by default, that should be equal to 0. All last semester, if we were putting a variable in and not defining it, we were getting an error. So I kind of like tend to defining it from the beginning. Now, I don't know if I don't know if they fixed that or what, but. Okay, so we got that defined, and now we're gonna take the next chunk from step 8, and we're gonna put it below the background color within the void draw block. So here's draw, and here's our background. So we're gonna put it after the background and paste. So if you guys get that in there, you guys notice anything weird about what we just pasted? Curious if anybody notices what I'm thinking right off the bat. Yep, the formatting. It's aligned left, even though it's inside of a block. So it shouldn't be aligned left. And so it's a little hard to read. Like it's not as quick to read as it could be. So if we do that command, there is a hotkey for it, right? Command Shift F. It'll automatically clean that up for us. And now we'll see that not only is everything inside of draw tabbed over, but because we have this condition now that also has brackets, that content in the, inside that conditional is also tabbed over. So it's like a third tier of content, right? So this just helps you visualize like where what code is situated and what. Okay, so we can go ahead and play that. So now we should get this shape going. It's not synced. It's not synced or anything, right? With the audio, but it's moving across the screen. And it's changing in scale. And it's resetting itself. It's actually doing a few different things there, right? And just to note, if anybody ever wants to mute their tab, you could actually literally do that. Instead of your volume on your computer, you could right click on a tab and mute an individual tab. So that could be helpful. And if you do that, it should give you, it's not right now though. Maybe if I play it. Yeah, see there's a little speaker on this tab. Now if I mute it, yeah, we'll get that icon that, oh, there's audio, but it's muted. So a little helpful tip. Okay, so let's look at this. Why is this happening, right? How is this thing moving and scaling and resetting? Well, if we wanted to figure that out without really knowing, we could do a like process of elimination and just, you know, comment everything out and start at one thing at a time and blah, blah, blah. But we're just going to look down through this pretty logically. So the first thing here is this expression. X is being assigned the value of, which is what a single equal sign is, right? It equals the value of, basically assigning. Like we wouldn't actually do X plus 2 equals X, right? Like that's backwards. See, it's like the same thing, but backwards. Syntax error, invalid left-hand side in assignment. We want whatever it is that we're defining to be at the beginning of the assignment. And then we're assigning it a value of something with a single equal sign. So what we're saying is, you know, originally we declared X is 0. So the beginning it's 0. And then we are assigning it to the value of itself plus 2. Well, it currently is 0. When we start the sketch, the very first time this line of code is being read, X is currently 0. So if 0 plus 2, we do 0 plus 2, that's 2. So now all of a sudden, after this draw loop has gone through one time, X is equal to 2. The second time draw is going to go through and loop, X is now equal to 2. So it would be 2 plus 2, which is 4. And then we'd go on and continue looping, right? This is just continually adding 2 to itself until infinity, unless we specify elsewise, which is exactly what happens right here. We have this if condition, which is questioning if X is greater than 400. If that is true, then we are going to execute the command, which is X equals 0. And then you can notice we're using the value of X as the X location of our ellipse and as our scale in the horizontal axis, right? So that's continually expanding both of those, the location and the scale. And then once X is greater than 400, because it keeps adding to itself, eventually X is going to get triggered to be back to 0, and then these will be back to 0, and then they'll rise up again, which is exactly what you can see visually here, right? The location, the X horizontal axis is enlarging, and then it's resetting. And if we want to see a closer look, kind of like what's happening under the hood, we could also put this in here, and we're going to cover this again, so you don't have to worry about it now. You could just look, you could just watch, but we can print something, and then followed by an actual value. And then this in the console will come up as 2 equals. Weird. Do I need that? There's something goofy about this. I don't know. I have to look at the reference later. So anyway, this is showing you behind the hood, like X is literally, you know, increasing in value. And then at some point, just about the same time when this resets, you'll see the number drops off, right? And what's cool about the console is if we stop this from running, we could actually scroll up and you can see like, oh yeah, right after X is 400, the next line of code, you know, X is going to be greater than 400. So we're going to assign it to 0. What if we never wanted to get to 100? We could do greater than or equals to 400, because that was another expression. And we could play this, let it run once, and then stop it, and then look at it. Yep, see, we never even got to 400. So there's different ways of managing your data. But the important thing here is to really grasp the logic that we made this integer value, X. We created it out of thin air. You know, we could call this anything. Sally. All right. Now we got to change everything where Sally or X is. I'm just showing you this for the hell of it. Please don't copy this because it takes time. All right, we get Sally going. There she goes. She's on the move. Right? So we've created this out of thin air, this variable. We've assigned an initial value. So when we implement this in as a value somewhere, it initially will have that value that we've set. And then we're doing some math and reassigning a new value to it. And because we're doing this inside of draw, we're continually updating that value over time. It just keeps going. And then at some point we want to say, okay, well, once it reaches a certain point, we want it to reset. Because in this case, like, well, once it goes off the screen, we're never going to see it again unless we tell it to do something else. Right? Or we could do like, you know, initial value could be -20. And then this could be reset to -20. And then when we play it, it looks like it kind of comes off the screen and not like on the screen, right? It's thinking like little bits of things through. So yeah, good time to save. I forgot to tell the other class that. Gotta save often. Two new global variables. Step 10. We're gonna throw those suckers in. Shazam, as Shazam used to say. And then once we have some new toys in there to play with, we can also grab step 11. We're gonna paste this below, paste the below code anywhere beneath the background in the draw loop. I heard this before. And so the things that we're copying are Z. You know, it's talking about Z, right? It's one of the new things that we just, one of the new variables that we just set up. So if we're pasting this somewhere below the background, I would argue that you guys probably would want to put it somewhere underneath of X, right? Just logical order, X, Y, Z, right? It's always helpful to keep things logical, because then you can read it easier when you go back the next time. Looks like the formatting's a little off. Do a little shortcut command there. All right, and then let's play that sucker. Oh, I got an error. Did I not paste that in? Oh, I undid a couple things. I was getting rid of Sally. All right, so we got this other shape moving across the screen. And same kind of logic. We have the Z adding to itself. This time it's a little smaller, right? It's only 1. Once it gets to 120, it's going to reset. We're doing some math for the fills. That's fine. And we're drawing it at 600 minus X. So we're actually, you know, like, why are we using X here? Because we can. Right? It doesn't matter. Just because we're using Z right above it doesn't mean we can't use something else. Kind of cross-pollinating. So a couple little tweaks here we could do, make things a little bit more interesting. We could change the background size of the canvas to, let's go 600 by 600. So it's a little bit bigger. And then this is the fun one. We can take this background, right? Like sitting at the top of draw. We can cut that, Command X, Control X, and paste it inside of setup. And let's run that. Right? So we should only have that background now drawing once. So all this other stuff is drawing over top of it. And maybe maybe this X value can change to be a little bit higher. I could see something a little bit clean and cooler. Yeah, see? Yeah. Maybe this is Z. Okay, let's see. Next bit of code from line step 15. This is going to be pasted at the bottom of draw under all of our other shapes. All right, well, let's do that. So still within the last bracket of draw. Right, this is for, well, it's not in the correct order though, is it? we could do X, Y, Z. If we wanted to be fancy. I think I missed a step because we're supposed to have another audio piece in here. Where did I miss it? Oh, step 14, I scrolled right past it. Look at that. That's some good memory right there. This one's a little tricky. So you might gotta make sure, yeah, I did skip 14, yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna copy 14, but this is, you really pay attention here. We're placing this code within the Z conditional statement. So just like we were, we've been putting stuff inside of draw, right? Which is like between the brackets. We could also do that inside of a conditional because those also have brackets. And I specified the Z conditional. So here's the if for the Z, right? Here's the bracket that starts. So we just need to return down from there or return down, after this, it doesn't matter. And paste. And that looks very, very complicated. So let's do a Command Shift F. Tidy it up. And there's just a bunch of notes in there, but let's see what this is saying before we even play it. When the condition for Z is true, right? When this is true, player 2 plays its sound, which is this. And then a trail is left and the background is redrawn. Oh, a trail is left for 100 seconds, 100 milliseconds, right? So we've added the ability to play a sound at the same time as we have this like flicker. So let's see if that's happening.
Vielleicht. 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 Vielleicht.
Anybody have questions? Either we're doing really good or we're doing not good, but I don't know. Okay, we did 15 and then 16. Let's see. Try different alterations, saving, kind of playing around, seeing how we can make changes. I would see if you guys could, play around with color a little bit or the speed of things, right? Just try to make like a little mini goal here and see if you can execute it. I'm almost wondering too, like maybe we can add the X, mouse X or mouse Y in some fashion, right? In some area. Like how might that work out? So all of you that are savvier with coding already, I don't want really anybody that's new to coding to think too complex right now. I want you to stay focused on your project itself, not think about like complex coding. And then I'll be trying to help you guys make sure I get a better grasp of like what you're attempting and help you to get to that point. But as you go along, you could also start to look at the stuff on the examples page as well. But realistically, this is kind of like an extension of the reference page, but it goes through and gives you more to chew on. So somebody had a question like, you know, I had an animated GIF on the proposal page, and like, you know, where did that come from? That was originally a processing code snippet that I recorded. So I'm not sure if it is relatable on here anywhere, but these all go through, you know, examples, and then depending on what it is, you know, maybe you're interested and you could figure out how it's working. Some things are much more complicated than others. So it's not like all about getting the most complicated thing. It's kind of just like ultimately, how do you get something that relates to what it is you're attempting, you know? It shouldn't be a project on just like taking somebody else's main code and changing a color, you know? It's not really a project.